On Wednesday, the U.S. Treasury Department announced it will sell its remaining shares of General Motors. This means taxpayers will rake in some sweet profits, right? That's what it means, right? I'm Allen Barton. Stand by for Front Page. Joining me today for some TARP talk are Terry Jones of Investors Business Daily and KABC's John Phillips. Guys, welcome. Thanks for being here. According to General Motors CEO Don Akerson, the GM the shares buyback is very good news. In a statement, he said this announcement is an important step in bringing closure to the successful auto industry rescue. It further removes the perception of government ownership of GM among customers, and it demonstrates confidence in GM's progress and our future. Terry, is this indeed a success of an auto industry bailout and selling their shares back to GM?
Well, if you're a large crony capitalist company, yes, it is a big success.
If you were on your way out from inefficient business practices, this was very successful.
If you're a small businessman who's now being asked to pay higher taxes to pay for GM's bailout, maybe not so much. They keep claiming this is a big success, but in fact, point of fact, taxpayers are going to get hit with this.
Do you think, they're trying, it's interesting that they're saying, like, we want to get rid of the perception amongst customers that our car company is government owned. Kind of an interesting acknowledgement that it would still have a negative connotation. I'm glad that they think there is still a negative connotation for that in this world. John, what do you think of that, throwing out that sort of little tidbit?
Well, it's the reason I bought a Ford. And I think the biggest change that we're going to see in government motors is that when you buy a car now, it's not going to have the pictures of Jesus hanging from the rearview mirror with President Obama's face superimposed over Jesus's face. Look, this cost us a ton of money. We're going to lose money on this. And they're saying, oh, don't worry about it because we made money on the AIG deal. So all of you conservatives and all of you free market types that are complaining, just go ahead and keep your belly aching at home.
It's a wash. I mean, when you bail out so many gigantic things, some are winners and some are losers.
And it's costly also to the degree that this cost us Ohio. I mean, Mitt Romney lost Ohio because of the government bailout. So however much money it costs us and billions of dollars that we're going to lose just in the stock deal, it also in part cost us the election. So I'm very bitter. Yeah, well, it also cost us potentially a better company, right, Terry? I mean, isn't the idea of what they would have had to go through is possibly a more stringent restructuring of their operations and potentially a more efficient company, or if they couldn't make it through bankruptcy, another company buys those assets and maybe does a better job with them. I mean, that's the thing that really, it's the unknown improvement in the business that is held back.
The government-directed bankruptcy that GM went through was really just one step away from being fraudulent, and may, in fact, have been fraudulent. I mean, look, they screwed Delphi workers who were non-unionized out of their pensions. They rewarded the labor union with a big chunk of GM stock for which they were not entitled under any law. GM was not permitted to restructure in ways that would make economic sense, and it still hasn't restructured in ways that would make economic sense, and it will experience trouble in the next economic downturn, I guarantee you. Even worse, I did the numbers on this yesterday. The way the numbers come out, it's going to lose, taxpayers about $15 billion.
Yeah, I was going to cover that because U.S. Assistant Treasury Secretary Tim Assad said the following, quote, "Moving to exit our investment in GM within the next 12 to 15 months is consistent with our dual goals of winding down TARP as soon as practicable and protecting taxpayer interests." So, as Terry said, he did the numbers. I guess they're buying back at $27.50 a share. What did the government buy in at? Is there a way of figuring that?
No, the government paid at the IPO price of $33 a share, but with all the money they put in and the buy-in, in addition to that, the break-even was $53 a share until they announced their sale yesterday. They're selling 40% of their shares at about $27.50. So that raises the break-even on the remaining shares from about $53 to $70 a share. So they will be losing roughly 61% of the remainder of their holdings from what they were expecting.
John?
You know, Alan, one of the criticisms of the bailouts of the financial houses when that happened was that they were too big to fail, that they had the government right where they wanted them to, where if they failed, they dragged down the economy with us. The same thing was certainly true for American automobile manufacturers. How has that dynamic changed? We still have the same market that we did before. We still have the same companies that we did before. And they weren't, as Terry mentioned, able to restructure in ways that would make them profitable moving into the future. Look at other companies that have dealt with financial setbacks. American Airlines, we were talking about them before we started taping. They're in bankruptcy. And they're going to have to get their house in order when they get out of bankruptcy, or they're not going to survive. JetBlue and Southwest Airlines and other airlines will fill that void, and they'll just go away, like Pan Am and other airlines have gone away in the past. That's how the market works.
Well, in 2011, Akerson was quoted as saying there needs to be a cultural revolution at General Motors. I mean, that's a hell of a phrase to use. Cultural revolution at General Motors, and that whomever followed him would have to carry it out. So what about the culture of General Motors? This is sort of what I was alluding to before, in the sense that what the bailouts prevent is a proper restructuring along the lines of basic survival. Our income needs to exceed our expenses, and how do we get that to happen? And when you have these bailouts, you sacrifice the necessary improvement in the business model. Yeah. You know, so do you think GM has done enough? I mean, clearly we think they haven't done enough, but what have they done in terms of trying to restructure? Have they done anything?
Well, yeah, I mean, they've done some very basic stuff, and they are making profits now, but it's sort of a dead cat bounce kind of profit, where the economy turns up a little bit, and all of a sudden you're selling enough cars to eke out a profit. But they still have the millstone of the union contracts around their neck, and that is going to hamstring them in competing with the non-unionized competitors. And that's been the problem all along. The other major element of this, and this is a huge part of it, I think, is that clearly the executives at GM are, at least to a certain degree, culpable for all of this. Okay, fine, when a company fails, you get rid of the old executives and bring in new ones. Who's going to want to work at GM? No, I think having had the government meddle in the company by owning a quarter of its shares and telling it what it can and can't do, and is still, by the way, telling it what it can and can't do. Yeah. No good executive is want to go and work there.
That was going to be my next question, is are they free, once they sell these shares, John, do you think they'll really be free of government interference with these directives, like building a bazillion volts that don't sell?
Well, they're tied to governments every which way. The government of Canada owns part of General Motors. This is a company that wanted to move their headquarters, and the government vetoed the idea, said, no, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to do that. And as screwed up as this company was, and this company was screwed up, they spent more money on healthcare, for example, than they did on steel.
Yeah, it was a healthcare services company more than it was a car company.
More and more, a lot of old line industrial companies are basically welfare providers, and industrial products is sort of a sideline that keeps their welfare provisions.
That's the thing they sell to provide healthcare. Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is that people think that there was like this auto industry bailout, and you heard this during the election. We saved the auto industry, but there are a huge number of factories and auto manufacturers that didn't receive any of this and didn't need it in right-to-work states like South Carolina, where BMW makes their cars, with American workers and American labor. I mean, isn't that part of what's missed? Everyone is sort of equating GM with the auto industry. You said in the beginning, this is why I got a Ford.
And Fords are having no problem selling right now. I used to do endorsements for Berge Ford in West Los Angeles. And they scaled back their ad buys, not because they were having trouble moving the product. They were flying off the shelves. I mean, people were showing up to buy their Edges and buy their Fusions and their hybrids and just everything, because it's a product that people wanted. And ultimately, capitalism will sort everything out. Ultimately, if you build a product that people want at a price that they can pay, then you're going to do just fine. And GM made a crappy product for a long time.
Well, the final question is that with the vote in Michigan to go to a right-to-work status, what do you think that does with regard to GM? Does that affect their ability to now deal with the unions more effectively?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think in the long run, this is a major wake-up call for the unions, because if something like this could get by in Michigan, which is, we know it as a union state, a bedrock union state, it can happen in any state except California. But I think the union movement, it's been on a long, steady decline since the late 40s. everywhere but in the government sector, I think it's pretty much doomed.
Last thought?
He's absolutely right. In fact, it might keep this action by the government in Michigan, the governor, might keep the auto industry in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, well, there was another article that GM is moving their production of the Camaro back into Michigan. Interesting that happened a week after they got some easing up on the unions. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today on that. For John and Terry, I'm Allen Barton, and you've been watching Front Page.